All right, fifth grade. So, happy Thursday. Getting pretty close to the end of the week here. We are going to today now talk about what's next. What is next for these Americans, right? They just won the war. They beat the king. They have been granted the ability to be their own country. Now what, right? What's next? All right, so you are watching this video right now. Number 2 is this kind of, it's kind of a cartoon about what we're going to talk about today, and then a Liberty Kids as well. So you got plenty of stuff to be able to watch today for social studies. Okay, so what we need to talk about here, these Americans now, their job is to decide how are they going to have a government, who's going to be in charge. They have this brand new country and a lot of people that are like, okay, so now what? And so the first thing that they need to figure out is what do they want in this new country and what do they not want? All right, so, we talked about how this country now is called, the one that they just created is called the United States of America. Now, obviously, that's what we call ourselves today, right? We are the same country that they're trying to create, just over 200 years later. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to find a picture here. So we're going to go to Google. Okay, and I'm going to look up 13 states flag. Okay, the 13 states flag. Here's what it looked like. This is what the original United States of America flag looks like. Okay, and now the reason why is because we look at this flag here. It's usually called the Betsy Ross flag. She was the woman who created this flag here. There are 13 stars, because if you remember, we talked about how there were 13 colonies, and now they're not colonies anymore. Now they are the states. So this is the flag that they used for this new country. So this is the United States of America flag back in I believe it was 81. Okay, there it is. Now today, if we look up the USA flag, okay, there it is. It's different now, obviously, because we don't have 13 stars, right? This one was 13 because there were 13 colonies. Now we have 50, right? 50, because there are 50 states now, right? We were able to add on a lot of states, 37 more states since we started our country. All right, that's why there's so much fewer stars here. Okay, so you can see there's 13 stars here. If you count, there's actually 13 stripes as well, and that is because there were 13 original states in the United States. Okay, so what do they want, right? So what is the very first thing? What are they talking about here? They're creating this new country. The first thing is obvious, right? They want more freedom. They hated that king, right? They're done with him. They are excited to be in this new country where they can practice any religion that they want. They can, work any job that they want. They can do anything, right? They want more freedom. Okay. Another thing is less people. Telling them how to live, right? Less people who are telling them how to live, all right? Back in Britain, there were a lot of courts telling people, hey, this is legal, this is illegal. You break the rule, here's what's going to happen to you. You are fined, you are jailed. There's a lot of courts, a lot of people that were in charge of kind of everything that you do, right? So the Americans now are very excited that there are going to be, hopefully, less people that are telling them how to live their lives. Right? Now, 2 things that they really don't want. First of all, the most obvious one, the biggest thing that these people who are now in this new country do not want, taxes. Right? That should be obvious because the king gave them all these taxes that were taking all their money from them, and they hated it, right? I'll be honest, every year that I have to do my taxes around the springtime, I dislike it. I don't like it very much. And so these Americans here, they did not want taxes. They already dealt with that with the king. They did not want to have to do that again. Okay. And then the last thing is a big government leader like a king. Govern. So government is actually there's an N in there kind of hiding. Government leader like a king. Okay. So The Americans did not want any taxes. They did not want a big government leader like a king, right? They just went to war over these two things. They hated those taxes that they were getting, right? They were throwing tea in the ocean. They were doing a lot of things because they hated those taxes. They also did not want a big government leader like a king because they just fought with that king. The king had way too much power. He could make any decision that he wanted and they had to follow it. They didn't like that. They didn't want just one person in charge of everybody. They really did not want that again. Okay, so what they decided to do was they were going to create this little paper. They're going to make some rules, okay? What was going to be true about the United States of America, okay? They called this the Articles of Confederation, okay? So they got together, they said, okay, we know what we want, we know what we don't want, let's make some rules. We're going to call it the Articles of Confederation. Okay, so here are a few things that were inside the Articles of Confederation. First of all, it was in 13 parts. I know that there are 13 states in the United States of America at this time. That had nothing to do with it. I don't know why it was 13, but that was what it was. There are 13 parts of the Articles of Confederation. Okay, so another thing that was inside of this kind of the rules here, they decided this new country, we are going to be called the United. So they decided the name of the new country would be the United States of America. Okay, so that's obviously a big thing, right? That's obviously very important that they decided that, because here we are today in 2021, and guess what? This is still the name of our country. Okay, so 240 years later or so, we still use this name for our country. Pretty cool. Okay, so another thing that is in the Articles of Confederation, the country will have a group of representatives from each state. So really the people that are going to be in charge of this country here are going to be some people from each state in the United States of America, from all 13, and they were going to get together and they were going to call themselves the Congress. Okay, now that's interesting because today we still have Congress. All right, Congress is still a thing that happens in our country. It's different today than it was back then. But if we look at Congress here today, I mean, it's a real thing. In the United States, we have Congress. Okay, it's a pretty outdated website. Yikes, it's not a very good website. But these are the people that are in charge. I mean, you can see the president of the Senate is Kamala Harris. You've probably heard of her before. She's the vice president of the United States. So the Congress is very important today. And they decided in the Articles of Confederation they were going to create that thing called Congress. Okay. Another thing that was in the Articles of Confederation, very important, states cannot be partners with any kings, right? So if you are, say, the person who's in charge of the state of Virginia, and you are friends with, the king of, let's say, France, right? And you want to say, you know what, let's be partners. Let's trade a little bit, right? You send us some really good French cheese, and we'll send you some good, I don't know, Virginia corn. In the Articles of Confederation, you are not allowed to do that because they did not trust kings anymore. Right? Kings, they knew, were bad because they just fought a war against a king. They don't want to have to, they just don't trust them. Okay? So, number 5 here, this is very important. All right? One other thing that was in the Articles of Confederation, states had to give money to the government when they needed it. Right? So today, if you imagine that, just imagine if President Joe Biden was like, hey, everybody, how is it going? Hope that you're having a great Thursday. Listen, we're needing some money. Why don't you give us some money? All right, we don't really have any money, so please just send us some money, and we promise we'll pay it back if we can, but we need it right now, so please give us some money. That'd be crazy, right? That'd be so weak, right? The government should not be asking money from us, right? Because they don't have any. That seems weak. The government should always have money coming in, either through taxes, that happens, or through other ways. And so states had to give money to the government, okay, which is very backwards. Today, now the government actually gives money to states if they need it, right? If Minnesota's like, wow, we really our restaurants are hurting because of COVID and we need some money, then Joe Biden and the government, they can give money to Minnesota for it, all right? In the Articles of Confederation, it was backwards, where the states were giving money to the big government. And that's very backwards. It was not a very good thing. Okay, now a few things here on slide number 4, things that were not in the Articles of Confederation. So very, very important thing, right? Very important things that the government, or that needed to happen that were not in the Articles of Confederation. Okay, so first, there was no money for the government. That's pretty important, right? There was pretty much, because there were no taxes, they did not want taxes. The government was poor, right? They couldn't do anything. They couldn't build roads. They couldn't build bridges. They couldn't build buildings. We'll talk down here on number 3 about another thing that they couldn't have. They were poor. It was not working, right? The states had a lot of money, but the government of the United States of America had none, and that was not good. Okay. There were no courts to decide if people are criminals, if they're guilty or innocent, because if you remember back here, they do want less people telling them how to live. And so they didn't want like courts. They didn't want judges or lawyers or anything like that. They didn't want anybody telling them how to live. And so there were no courts to decide if people are criminals, which is very unsafe. Can you imagine if people could just do whatever crime they wanted and there were no courts to say if they were innocent or guilty? There were a lot of crimes happening during this time that, no one was able to say that they were guilty and had to go to jail. All right. So that was another thing that was wrong with the Articles of Confederation. First of all, no money for the government. Second of all, no courts. Nobody was around to say, hey, stop doing those criminal things, right? So next, this is the one that I talked about here that kind of has to do with money. The army to protect the country, right? So that's obviously very important. The nice thing is that they just finished a war, and so they don't have to worry about fighting the British again for a little bit. I will say they do fight the British again pretty right away. There was called the War of 1812. So this is about 35 years later, after the American Revolution. They actually fight another war. We don't talk about that war in 5th grade. You'll talk about that later, probably in middle school. But they needed an army, right? Because they had no money, they couldn't have an army to protect the country, right? Each state had their own army, but if there was a battle in, let's say, Massachusetts, the army in Georgia could go if they wanted, but they didn't have to, right? That's not strong. That's not good. They have to have some sort of army that will protect the whole country, like we have today, right? If somebody tries to attack Minnesota, you can bet that the whole military of the United States, everybody would come here to try to protect us and anybody who needed protection, right? So that was another bad thing about the Articles of Confederation. But biggest of all, last, you could not make any changes or additions to the Articles of Okay, so you can't make any changes or additions to the Articles of Confederation. If my voice is cutting out a little bit, it's because for some reason my computer is pausing this video and I have to restart it. So don't worry about it. But the last thing, but biggest of all, you could not make any changes or additions to the Articles of Confederation. So they passed it. It was the law. Those were the rules of the United States of America. And then they realized, oh my gosh, look at all these mistakes we made, right? No money for the government, no courts to decide if people are criminals, all their criminals running around. There's no army to protect the country, and they couldn't change it. They couldn't make any additions to it at all, right? It was the rule, okay? So, remember that if I'm going too fast, you can always pause, but we'll finish up on this last slide here, number 5. So, the Articles of the Confederation, Articles of Confederation, I don't know why there's a "the" there, lasted for 8 years. Okay, 8 years, not very long. Okay, I will say that because the Articles of Confederation were not very good, we actually made a new thing, and that thing that we made actually still exists today. So that thing is called the Constitution. The Constitution has lasted over 240 years. Okay, so compared to the thing that was before it, 8 years, not very good, right? 8 years compared to 240, not very good. Okay, so the Articles of Confederation only lasted 8 years. And they realized it was not very good and had to make some changes. And so they do. We'll talk about that kind of tomorrow, why they had to make some changes, some things they needed to change. So overall, the Articles of Confederation were a big oops, right? They made a mistake. It was not the best thing. It was a good start, for sure. It led to some good things, right? Like we talked about how it gave us our name, right? It established Congress, why that was important. Those are two things that we still do today. But overall, it was a big oops. It was not very good. All right, so tomorrow we'll talk about the changes that they needed to make and this new thing that they came up with called the Constitution that we still use today. And I'm actually going to give you one before the end of the year. Okay? So, any questions, ask myself or Mr. G today.